Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Very, very excited to share today's guest with you because he is not only the proprietor of one of the web's most visited low-carb, high-fat diet sites, dietdoctor.com. Not only is he a medical doctor, but he is also a wonderful friend, a man I had the chance to meet and dine with on numerous occasions on the recent low carbohydrate cruise. Truly a great person, in addition to a great doctor and a great blogger and a great researcher and just a smart man. Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for your kind introduction.
Well, my pleasure, Dr. Eenfeldt, and I wanted to bring you on the show today because you really are on the forefront of, I think a lot of people who listen to this show might not know what's going on in your native country of Sweden in terms of an intentional intake of fats and an intentional intake of carbohydrate. And I'd love if you could illustrate and explain what's going on for us.
Sure. I mean, for the last couple of years, or should I say, perhaps I should say 5 or 6 years, low-carb, high-fat diets have become very popular in Sweden for many reasons, but primarily, obviously, because it works very well, and people see their friends doing it, and they get inspired to try it out themselves. So there's been a few surveys in the last few years showing that perhaps like a quarter of the Swedish population is doing some form of low-carb diet, and perhaps 5% is on a really strict low-carb, high-fat diet where ketogenic diet where you basically exclude all carbs. So it's been an interesting couple of years for sure, and it's just still just picking up momentum. So it's going to be interesting to see what it leads to.
Well, and Andreas, what do you think it is about the Swedish population that has caused this this exponential and very statistically significant rise in a low carbohydrate, high fat lifestyle? Why Sweden? Why not some other country?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, but obviously, low carb diets have been popular in your country as well for some periods of time. But I think when you look at Sweden, it's there was some events like 2006 to 2008 that sort of sparked this interest, and it kind of started with when a family doctor in Sweden got really interested in. Her name is Dr. Annika Dahlqvist, and she got really interested in this low carb thing after having lost a lot of weight and improved her health eating that way. And then she started to prescribe it to her patients, and this was obviously a very controversial thing. She got a lot of attention in the media, and a couple of dietitians notified the medical authorities in Sweden, the National Board of Health and Welfare, because they were worried that this was going to harm her patients, and maybe even people might die from eating a high-fat diet. That is what they used to believe. So the National Board of Health and Welfare, they did a large investigation for trying to find out what to do with this doctor and her advice to make sure that they did the right thing. And then after a couple of years of this investigation, they came to their conclusion, and they basically said that this is okay. This doctor, she can keep giving that advice. We're not going to criticize her because science shows that giving advice on a low carb diet actually is effective for losing weight, and there's no clear evidence that it's harmful in any way. So this is now we're talking back in January of 2008, and that was sort of the start of this movement in Sweden at larger scale, because this got quite a lot of attention in the media, like every television channel and every paper basically wrote and had was talking about this. So a lot of people became interested in it, and that's sort of when the interest started to get really big. And then it's been, I mean, if you look at people searching on Google for low carb, high fat, it's called LCHF in Sweden. You can see that it's just been going up every year since 2008. So it's exciting.
It's very exciting. And Andreas, have you personally in your practice, because I remember from our talks on the low carb cruise, which was just such a delight, that there's still doubt, despite the fact that you've got almost a quarter of the population doing this, despite the fact that there are countless clinical trials proving the efficacy and safety of this type of lifestyle. And despite just basic biology, which explains why it would not be harmful and would be beneficial, there still continues to be some doubt and some concern in even the Swedish medical community. And you certainly are part of that medical community. Have you seen any blowback or have you been, for lack of better terms, attacked in any way by your peers for your promotion of this lifestyle?
Well, personally, I would say more or less no. I mean, some people obviously disagree with me, but I don't feel like I've, been really attacked. Not much anyway. I mean, some people do have some objections and so on, but I mean, you can discuss it. You can give them references to numerous studies showing that it works and doesn't seem to be any danger involved. And I think most people, once they get a load of studies, like 20 different studies, they just tend to briefly look at them and then say, okay, yeah, whatever, and keep doing what you're doing. And they don't really have the time or the inclination to sort of really get into this. So...
Well, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like as long as you have a scientific, at least one scientific leg to stand on, which it seems like we actually have more than one leg. We have two legs to stand on and maybe a ledge to lean on as well. You can get some ground cover. Well, and Dr. Eenfeldt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really feel nervous in any way when I give this kind of advice to my patients. I work as a family doctor, and if I meet people with obesity who want to lose weight, or if I have a diabetic patient who has a hard time controlling his blood sugar, I always talk about this and see if it's possible to motivate them to do a lifestyle change and to eat less carbs and probably more fat. So, and when I do that, I don't ever feel any, nervousness regarding what other people would say, because I know. I mean, I've been doing this now for 6 or 7 years in my medical practice, and I know what the results will be because I see it every week. People. It's usually there's only one problem basically with a low carb diet in that situation, and that is that some people find it hard to do. Mm-hmm. They find it hard to give up most of their bread and potatoes and fruit and whatever. But most people, if they're really motivated to lose weight and improve their health, then they will tend to be able to do this, and they all come back with having lost weight and improved their health, and usually they feel a lot better too. So it's all good.
It's absolutely all good. And I'm so encouraged to hear that, Andreas. I recently also had the good fortune of talking with Dr. Jeff Gerber, who I know you've spoken with as well. And it seems like the more MDs I talk with, the less and less stigma there is, even in the medical community, of prescribing, for lack of better terms, a lower carbohydrate lifestyle. And that I people might say, well, whoop-de-doo, but let's be very clear, that was not the case 20 years ago. It was literally, I mean, as you mentioned with your peer Annika, that, it was not the case with her, and it was not the case with Dr. Adkins. And so to see that in just a generation, we are in a realm where physicians such as yourself can do this without fear of having your credentials attacked. I see is amazing. It makes me very happy. What do you think?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think we're in a totally different place now than compared to Dr. Atkins back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because they didn't have the good scientific support that we do now. I mean, all the studies I point to when I want to support giving a low carb diet advice, I mean, they're all from 2003 and after that. It's all from the last 10 years basically, and before that there wasn't really much in the way of good quality scientific support. Sure, I mean, people like Dr. Atkins, he knew what happened when people ate a low carb diet. I mean, he had thousands of patients, but that's still just anecdotes when you try to support it scientifically. So it's hard. I think it was hard back then. You really needed to have a lot of confidence to be able to do it. But now it's not hard. I mean, if you look at the scientific literature available, I don't think there's any question that this is a very beneficial way to lifestyle change for people with specific medical problems like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on, a few more situations.
Well, and Andreas, you make a very interesting point there of people with specific medical conditions, because I know sometimes there can be some confusion potentially in individuals in the, let's call it paleo or hunter-gatherer community, which is a fantastic community. It's a community all about food quality. It's awesome. I love it. It's very similar to what I recommend. Certainly has a lot of science behind it. And the distinction is people talk about, well, there are things like potatoes and other starches that are incredibly high in carbohydrate and are found in nature and are whole foods and do have some nutrients in them. But one thing you touched on the low carb cruise, and I think is such a wonderful distinction, is really being clear about, are we talking about people who are already sick, like are already metabolically deconditioned, or are we talking about people who are not? Like, are we talking about a healthy 20-year-old, or are we talking about a diabetic postmenopausal woman? And who you're talking about dramatically impacts the safety of starches. What do you think about that?
No, absolutely. And I think that's sort of behind all this, confusion and sort of negativity sometimes perhaps between the low carb people, if you want to call them that, and the higher carb paleo people. Because I mean, we're looking at different groups basically. I mean, like you said, if you're healthy, if you're fit, if you're 20 years old, and if you do a lot of crossfitting, you don't really need to eat a ketogenic low carb diet. Probably, it might be that some people enjoy doing that anyway, but probably it's just not necessary. On the other hand, if you're older, if you have more medical problems and more problems controlling your weight, then you're in a very different situation. So when it comes to carbohydrates and starches, people are talking about safe starches like rice and potatoes and whatever, or sweet potatoes, where there's no toxins and so on. But they are safe for some people, perhaps most people, but they're not safe for all people.
And I think there's such as a doctor and as a very well-respected doctor, it seems like you have firsthand experience with saying that your recommendations really have to be focused on the patient. I know you want to learn the patient's medical history. You need to understand the context of the patient. So what do you think when people say things like this diet X or eating approach X is the best way for everyone to eat? What do you think when people say things like that?
Yeah, I think probably the more certain you are of a thing like that, the less you tend to know. I mean, the more you learn, the more you realize that there is not one perfect diet for everybody. I mean, at the very least, people have different habits and likes and dislikes and so on. So different lifestyles. So we need to sort of fit the diet to the lifestyle as well, and the traditional diet of the area where you're living, perhaps, and so on. I mean, it all depends on who we're talking about, but I do think that most, if not every, person would do better by avoiding the worst carbs, like loads of sugar, soda, obviously, and candy and cakes and white flour and so on. So probably everybody would do well to get rid of that. But we talk about sweet potatoes, maybe some rice. I mean, if you can handle it, sure, why not eat it? I don't think that's a big problem for most people, but it is a problem for some people, like a significant minority of the population, and perhaps, I mean, even if you look in the Western world, if you look in the United States, for example, you have, what is it, like 68% people with obesity or something?
Yeah, it's about at least 2/3 are overweight. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, in that situation, I mean, maybe most people would do well to stop eating most of the refined starches.
Yeah, and I think well, you really hit the nail on the head there. When there does have to be some sort of generally recommended dietary practice. I mean, that's just the way the world works, right? And for the longest time, it's just been horrible. It's been these food guide pyramids and My Plate and each country's derivation of those USDA monstrosities. But when you're dealing, like your point, and Dr. Jay Wortman also made this point on the cruise, which are right on. If the country you live in is 70% obese, or excuse me, 70% overweight, that also means that it's basically normal to be insulin resistant. That is normal. Like, that is what the even more than the majority is. The default or the baseline recommendation to be as clear and as helpful as possible needs to be the one that would be healthy for that 70% of the population, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna give diet advice to the entire population, they had better, suit the majority, right? If they're a disaster for the majority, then it's not a good recommendation. And obviously, if you look at My Plate and the old diet guide pyramid, that's just a disaster. That's too much grains, basically.
Well, and it's
too much carbs.
And it's always just interesting too, because I think one concept that I've had the unique opportunity to talk with. I try to talk with a diversity of people in this arena. And recently I spoke with Dr. Joel Furman and Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who certainly have very strong opinions about both paleo and the low carb approach. But one point that they shared with the broader community was this idea of eating the most of things that provide essential nutrients and that cause the least damage to the body, and ensuring that we don't crowd those out by eating things that we don't need. And one thing that I just have a hard time wrapping my head around is, like, if a potato just gives you so much joy, like if you're just like, oh my God, like some people just crave chocolate. If that's how you felt about a potato and it gave you so much joy, that's one thing. But like, why? I mean, it's not even like it's that tasty. I mean, potatoes are really only delicious when you fry them or when you do a bunch of other stuff to them. Same thing with rice. It's not like an individual is just like, oh my God, rice is so delicious. Why are we even talking about this if these safe starches are not really even that tasty? And it's a fact that they are not concentrated sources of essential nutrients. They have some essential nutrients, but they can't compare to fruits and vegetables, let's say. So why are we even wasting our breath talking about this? What do you think?
Well, that's a good question. But I mean, I guess some people like it. Some people do like potatoes quite a lot, I know. I mean, not by itself, but combined with like a steak or whatever. So some people like it a lot. I can tell you that for my patients, I think potatoes is one of the 3 things that are hardest to avoid. Mm-hmm. It's like potatoes and it's bread and it's fruit. I think the three big ones that are hard for some people to leave behind, so to speak.
Well, and do you see them? So again, this might just be me showing my ignorance, and I'm totally comfortable with that. But I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone eat a plain potato. Like there's
no. I mean, you don't eat potato by itself. That's not fun. Sure, you need something else with it. Anyway, you mentioned Joel Fuhrman and Colin Campbell and this vegan movement. And interestingly, I think you can eat a vegan diet that is way better than what most people eat.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, if you exclude refined foods, basically, and processed stuff, and you eat plenty of vegetables and so on, I mean, that could be okay. I just don't think there's any point in avoiding animal products. I think you just make it harder for yourself. But I think this debate between low carb, paleo, and vegan people is perhaps, I mean, in a way unnecessary, because we're all talking about improving the food quality from, comparing if you go to McDonald's or something.
Well, and it's the irony I saw, Andreas, was that there's this. In some ways, you could have imagined there was a spectrum. On like the far left, there's low carb, high fat. On the far right, there is the incredibly high carb, low fat approach that, like, say, a T. Colin Campbell, which in our conversation he says like 80% carbohydrate. And then in the middle, you had paleo. And so this was just fascinating to me. The more paleo approves of or encourages safe starches, you're either going to eat, like if you eat a lot of potatoes, you're going to be too full to eat other stuff. And someone like a T. Colin Campbell says that basically the majority of your calories have to come from starch, because if they're not coming from fat, and certainly they're not going to be coming from protein, because he's a vegan, that you're going to be essentially, paleo starts to look a lot more like veganism or vegetarianism, ironically. And then the low carb movement has focused so much on food quality, which is great, that it's almost like everything has slid down this spectrum. It's like paleo and like low carb has taken on a lot of amazing paleo characteristics, and paleo now seems to actually be taking on more of a high carb, starchy plant diet characteristics. What do you think about that?
Oh, really? That sounds a bit odd to me. I mean, it's not. I mean, maybe some people, some portions of the paleo movement is like that, and some other portions are very much into animal products as well. I mean, it's certainly not the old Cordain paleo diet if you're excluding most animal products and eating a lot of starch. That's something else, right?
Oh, absolutely. My point was more that the more it just seems like the airtime being dedicated to eating starches is, one could say, yes, it's a whole. So in talking with Dr. Campbell, his big thing was like he's got this new book called Whole, and the focus of the book is just saying eat whole plant-based foods. And part of what the paleo community focuses on is actually the aversion of many types of plant-based foods. Like you want to avoid things with anti-nutrients in it. For a long time, things like tubers and any kind of starch were really downplayed in favor of more nutrient-dense sources of calories. And the more airtime starches get, the more it seems like there's just a blurry line between this meatless whole food, the meatless whole food paleo, which I guess is not really paleo. It's just, and it's not, obviously there's the large proportion of the paleo community, much like a large proportion of the low carb community, recognizes and celebrates the awesome health benefits of high quality animal foods. I just see it as interesting that as low carb has evolved, it's taken on some paleo characteristics. As paleo has evolved, it's taken on some low carb characteristics. And in fact, as veganism and a plant-based diet also, and as paleo starts to emphasize the importance or permissibility of starches, those lines start to blur too. So it just becomes interesting.
Yeah, maybe the vegans will start to eat a high-fat diet, like a high vegetable fat diet. And then it's all confused. You know?
Exactly. One, the irony is that while it may sound like I'm saying this is bad and I wish we could have strong dividing lines, I actually think it's great, because the more we can stop focusing on these subtle differences and start saying, don't eat processed garbage, just move to real food. And once you get to real food, then we can talk about, because you'll feel better, you'll look better, you'll want to do more. And then we can talk about which lifestyle you like the most. And maybe that's for convenience, maybe it's for morality reasons, maybe whatever. There's a diversity of options that could work for you. But the fact that we're seeing these lines blur, like I actually think if we could focus on that blurry portion a little bit more and focus less on the points of disagreement, that might be key to the tipping point. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, definitely, I think just fighting between, these groups, just fighting the other groups, it's a shame, because, the most important thing might be to get rid of the processed sort of refined starches and sugars that are making 70% of the population obese or overweight and obese, and a lot of people are getting diabetes and complications from that. I don't think it's a problem, people going off eating a low-fat vegan diet. I don't think people are getting obese from that. Maybe a few, but most people certainly not. And I don't think that's the problem. I have no interest in telling vegans to eat in another way. Everybody can keep eating what they're eating. But I think the problem is that most of the population is sort of into this calories in, calories out mode, where they just think that to lose weight, they need to eat less and they need to move more. And I think that's a horrible oversimplification that makes it more or less impossible for most people to actually lose weight long term, because it sort of assumes that people can just ignore their hunger, and almost nobody can do that.
You're spot on, Andreas. And I know you had some firsthand experience with two individuals who certainly don't believe in that. And their dietary habits certainly, let's say, reflected their disbelief in that. And I'm talking about none other than myself and my wife.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever met anyone eating more calories than you. And you don't have like a gram of fat on you. So obviously there's something wrong. Or maybe you do. Like every second I didn't see you on the cruise, you were exercising. That is the other possibility.
Well, I can tell you that was not the case, but yeah, I was just laughing because we had the good fortune of having Andreas as well as Dr. Jay Wortman and some other amazing individuals at our dinner table on the low carb cruise. And I'll just point to one example. There was one meal where I ordered 2 appetizers and 5 entrees. Now, granted, they're all very, very sane things. I think I had like 2 salmons, a steak, and 2 other things. And my wife, who is this far and away not an overweight individual, had 3 dinners, and everyone's just looking at us like, what the? And I'm like, hey, we're just trying to prove a point.
It's like we needed a bigger table to fit your plates on it. But that was funny to see. Yeah, I was impressed by. I've never seen anybody eat as much as you, I think, ever. Well, but also, like you said, it's all good food. I mean, plenty of vegetables to say the least.
Yeah, well, it was certainly a joy, and I really appreciated our time together. And Andreas,
that was good fun.
It was a lot of fun. Just to wrap up, I mean, I really wanted to dig into what motivates you, because if folks haven't been to your website, and folks, please do check out dietdoctor.com, because it is an amazing free resource. And one of the things you'll notice is that word free. It's scientifically based, it's rigorously researched, and it's all free. And there's no ads, there's very little if any product placement. And you're a practicing physician, you've got a family, you're a busy guy. What motivates you to do so much for so many with asking for nothing in return?
Well, I do. I mean, like you said, I don't have any monetization at all of my English blog, but I do have it on my Swedish. So I wouldn't claim to be, doing this only for the benefit of others, but perhaps mostly because, I mean, it pisses me off basically that people are suffering needlessly from these old failed ideas of the past. I really feel that we need to get beyond that and sort of use the science and the experience that exists and spread it and so that more people can benefit from it. And I mean, I meet people every week at my clinic, or maybe when I do lectures, and people emailing me, my readers from my blogs, telling me that once they stopped eating a lot of carbs, they lost weight effortlessly, and their health problems went away. And you would really want more people to be able to experience that, instead of just being told this Coca-Cola logic of today that eat anything, only do it in moderation and move more, and everything's going to be all right. It's not true. For most people, it's not going to be okay. I mean, some people can do it, most people can't, and there is a better way. And I guess that's what's motivating to me is trying to spread this knowledge to more people.
Well, I think
that they can benefit from it.
I think that's great, Andreas, and I just want to thank you, and I want to encourage all of our listeners to please check out dietdoctor.com. There's very few resources on the internet that are as rich and reliable as Andreas's site. And also, I think this is I'm super hopeful after having this podcast, because just to quickly summarize, we talk about how you're able to discuss this modern science of food quality in your practice without fear of negative repercussions. And we're talking about how these once completely, let's call it diverging thoughts of nutrition in terms of veganism and paleo and low carb are actually sharing so much now and actually have so much in common. And just talking about the opportunity for folks to see such dramatic health benefits with such little effort if they can start to embrace these common denominators that focus on food and nutrients rather than just calories in moderation. Man, I think that's a good place to be in. At least it's a step in the right direction.
Oh, certainly. And I think you're doing great work too. I mean, with your very impressive videos, for example, to spread this information. So, I mean,
Well, I appreciate it.
I'm an optimist for the future, for sure.
Oh, I absolutely am. I think, the internet giving us the ability to make these connections and distribute this information. And I think, like you said, there's really nothing that speaks louder than results. And the more people we can get this information to, and the more people who just do it, and results speak for themselves, it's pretty hard to argue against results. So I thank you for all that.
Yeah, and I think that's the main argument for low carb. I mean, it works for the right kind of person. It just works, and it's so obvious to not only that person but to people around him or her, and that's why I'm optimistic for the future that this is just going to spread, and with the help of the internet and people like you and lots of other people spreading this, I think can really make a big impact.
I love it. Well, thank you for all that you do, Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt, and thank you for joining us today. And folks, if you haven't seen his website, again, it's dietdoctor.com. That's got to be one of the best URLs ever. So please check it out.
Thank you.
And please remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Talk with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.